Alright, I'm back again. I'm Rotor Storm 331. I'm here to do the last of the three guides for East State, the La Cromosa of Donna. This guide we'll be doing right now is going to be the recommended skills for each character to consider mastering. This is more of a guide meant for people that don't want to spend all their time building up skills and instead prioritize skills that they would use not only for story but also raid battles, among other things. So anyway, if you enjoyed the content that I've been putting out, feel free to leave a follow or a sub to my Twitch channel, and this is also going to be exported to YouTube. So if you enjoyed the content I've been putting out on YouTube, feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel as well. That inspires me to do more content as well as keep my channel growing bit by bit. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. So this guide is actually what I would consider recommending skills. You've probably noticed I did that for each character, for each of their guides. But then again, you got plenty of skills to use until you get those best ones. So that's not going to be happening anytime soon. So you got to use whatever skills you do get at the end of once you get access to them. So basically, what we're going to be doing is covering over what skills, what any of the other characters will need, and I'll tell you whether or not they'll be good for main story mode, raid battles, or other things. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. So as I mentioned, for Adol is pretty much one of the more well-rounded characters. Most of his skills prioritize giving him different advantages or for any situation that might happen. So he's actually all-rounded on pretty much on good on skills. So if I was to recommend prioritizing for main story, I would prioritize arc shot, aerial spin, force edge, tornado sword, sky drive, aura blade, thrust storm, blade rush, and braid charge. Now, if you want to prioritize getting air combos for more XP, I would also strongly recommend leveling up and mastering Rising Slash as well. Sonic Slide, if you're doing a speed run, this actually does give you a little bit of momentum, but that can easily get replaced by Loxia's Blitz Charge, but it does have some pretty good range overall. Sword Impact is probably better used for raid battles, but it becomes much later in the game in general, and it can easily get replaced by Force Edge. Force Edge, I would strongly recommend mastering this because this covers not only Adol's any enemies in front of it, but it also develops another slash right behind him too. So it also hits any enemies right behind him as well. So Force Edge, I would strongly recommend. Aerial Spin is probably one of his earlier proximity attacks before Force Edge and Sword Impact. This is also syncs up very well with Rising Slash after you perform it. So this is very good if you're going to go for air combos and good protection proximity range. Aura Blade is kind of an optional skill I would consider mastering. It does have the benefit of hitting any enemies on higher elevations as well as flying enemies, but it's kind of situational at best. But it does have very good stats overall. It's not to mention it's a very good single targeting skill. Skydrive can easily replace aerial spin when you're doing aerial combos, and it can also act as a added projectile as well. So this could be a very good skill to have later on in the game. Tornado Sword is good the moment you get it, but it kind of falls off near the end of the game when you're fighting more stronger enemies. Damage doesn't go nearly as high as you would expect, unfortunately. But it's definitely well useful in raid battles and hunts. So if you're going into those fights, this is actually a much needed skill. Not to mention it has vacuum priorities, so you can take full advantage of that. Thrust Storm, of course, is definitely recommended, as well as anything with A's, because this is actually his best DPS. Blade Rush is actually more go-to high attack skill for the time being. Not to mention, by the time it gets mastered, it'll become a short-range projectile for the last hit. And of course, once you get Braid Charge, this is actually his very good movement tool as well as for a big strike. So these would be the recommended skills I would recommend prioritizing mastering with Adol. So coming up is Loxia. Loxia will probably prioritize mostly on one-on-one situations. She has very few means to attack enemies from a distance, and very few means of combating enemies in multiples. So basically, she'll do well in boss fights, but not against anything like raids or hunts. But she does have a few options. Of course, some of her skills do have very good stats in break or stun, but terrible otherwise. But anyway, if you are going to be prioritizing skills for Loxia, I would recommend leveling up and mastering Wake Up, Sylphid's Kiss, Blitz Charge, Eagle Lancer, Stun Thrust, Spark Chaser, Piercing Tempest, and Lethal Raid. Now, Precious Impact is optional. You get this is the last skill that she'll spark automatically, but it is good for raid and hunt battles where you're going to be fighting more enemies than normal. Probably one of her optional skills is Needle Break. It's very terrible on level 1 and 2, but once it gets mastered, the wind up range is gone and it comes out pretty fast. It does have very high break with a double S, and of course it has double B plus for the stun, but it's not very strong overall. Sylphid's Kiss, of course, I would strongly recommend. This is not only a very good follow-up for Wake Up, not to mention keeping enemies juggled in place, but this also allows her to attack any enemies on higher elevations. Of course, if you're doing speedrunning, Blitz Charge is a must, because once it's mastered, it allows, with plus movement, this will allow her to move very far. Eagle Lancer and Stun Thrust are recommended because this gives her initial paralysis. So if you give her anything that adds paralysis, like Stone Hands, Thunder Bracelet, or Gauntlets, she could definitely rack up plenty of paralysis hits to inflict paralysis on enemies. Piercing Tempest is going to be her best overall DPS for single targeting, whereas Lethal Raid not only is her very huge big attack, but also hits proximity range, hitting any other enemies in addition to the enemies she's hitting with. Spark Chaser is probably her best long range skill attack. It does have limited homing priorities, but it only affects those that are at a very far distance. Another optional skill is Rapid Thrust. Even though it's a very poor damaging attack, it does help with stat buildup for like paralysis and the whatnot. So if you want to inflict status elements with Loxia, this is not a bad ideal for a skill to use, but you'll probably get Piercing Tempest before you get this skill because Rapid Thrust is learned much later in the game. So those are my options for recommended skills for Loxia. Now, Sahad, I should probably put it out. I definitely like playing Sahad. This game is definitely tailored to most of his skills and allows him to easily do well not only in main story but also in raid and hunt battles. So anyway, the skills I would recommend having him master are Wild Appeal, High Wave, Grand Anchor, Upper Break, Great Ram, Power Strike, Sinine Toss, Magna Wave, Spiral Anchor, and Raging Deluge. Now, Gale Blow is actually more stronger than High Wave, and of course, it doesn't really hit as doesn't have has a little bit more better range than High Wave does in terms of trajectory. But this is a little bit late to get. Not to mention, Sahad will probably prioritize more on attacking more enemies in a group as opposed to a single target. But if you're going for a single target, I would consider this an optional one. It does take quite a while though because it does require a lot of SPEX acclimation. High Wave, even though it's not a very strong attack, it's actually very good for hitting enemies on higher elevations. Not to mention get some of those resource items that you would normally have a hard time getting earlier. Now, Wild Appeal and Sinine Toss are actually recommended for raid battles and hunts. Sinine Toss will pull any enemies towards Sahad, while Wild Appeal basically draws any aggro towards him. Upper Break is kind of optional if you're going for more XP and leveling up faster. You'll definitely want something to do with air combos. But Spiral Anchor can easily replace that, even though that's his last best skill that he gets of the entire game for sparking. Magna Wave is going to be his almighty powerful attack the moment you get this. This easily replaces Great Anchor, and the moment you pull up all that earth, it does very high damage. So mastering this is a must. Raging Deluge is a very great proximity attack for Sahad. This allows him to basically not only hit all the enemies around him, but this also acts as his best DPS, especially if you do it real close to any enemies up close. Power Strike is actually a very good attack. It's almost identical to Adol's Force Edge. I don't know if it hits any enemies behind him. I would have to test that out myself, but if it does, this is actually a very good skill to have later on. It's basically Spiral Anchor is basically a ramped up version of Power Strike, to be honest, but does pretty much the same thing. But Spiral Anchor adds like 2 Power Strikes plus Vacuum Effect to it as well. Great Ram is actually more of a good skill for raid and hunt battles. Basically, it just ramps up Sahad's defense, and this also has very high stuns, so this is actually very good for boss fights. But overall, you'll basically use Great Ram as your means to lower the damage that Sahad would normally take for the most part. So those are the skills I would strongly recommend having Sahad master. So Hummel is our mid-range fighter specialist. He does have a few close-range options. The skills I would recommend for him are Somersault, Burst Shot, Counter Trick, Quaker, Guilty Raid, Judgment, Assault Raid, Firecracker, and Prominent Shot. Now, Triple Bomber as well as Firecracker are probably better suited for raid and hunt battles, since you're going to be fighting more enemies, and you'll definitely want to utilize these attacks in areas where they're going to be striking, like the lures or the barricades or the torches. Now, Hasty Valor is optional. The one reason I don't like using this skill is because even though this allows him to have very high DPS earlier on, it's more of the fact that he suffers from kickback that pushes him back each shot he fires. Not to mention the shots are not very strong, despite this being an A rank skill. But then again, each of the accumulating shots does add up for the most part. Now, counter trick is a very good skill that definitely protects him. If you do want to prioritize poison stats, Hummel's actually very good. You can use Venomous Bullet for that. Burst Shot actually hits twice, which is very good for an earlier skill that he gets. Somersault is optional if you're going for air combos. That can be easily followed up with Quaker. Guilty Raid kind of falls off very late into the game due to the fact it's a very early skill. Judgment actually stays pretty decently strong throughout most of the game. I would strongly put that in overall, and his Soul Raid is just very good to maneuver Hummel out of enemy range while at the same time attacking them. So it's a very good repositioning skill. And Prominent Shot, once it hits an enemy, will detonate a big blast effect. So any enemies that get hit with this, along with the targeted enemy, will take a lot of damage. But this is probably his last skill that you'll get with that. So anyway, these are the skills I would recommend with Hummel. For Rakota, she gets a lot of interesting perks when she masters certain skills. She'll get either poison or burn status effects, but at the end of the game, she'll get access to very high stun skills like Mighty Orbit and Dino Throw. So for skills I would recommend with Rakota to master, I would recommend Wild Spin. That's going to be your launcher skill for the most part. I would also recommend Bandit Tackle because that's going to be her stealing skill. And you'll definitely need that for items like Essence Stones and whatnot. I think the next one I would recommend is Beast Attack. I don't know if this inflicts burn. I would have to test that out. Green Whip, Mighty Orbit, Flame Swing, Triple Bang, and Dino Throw. Now, Spiral Drive and Rumble Thorn, and Handmade Trap, I would consider to be more optional. These are actually very good skills, but Spiral Drive does have a proximity impact. It does give Rakota some movement in turn. But by the time you do get Dino Throw, this would be a lot better. Not to mention, both Triple Bang and Dino Throw have status elements applied when mastered or initially, so those are actually pretty good. Rumble Thorn is actually very good for a proximity attack. It's kind of hard to really used it near the end of the game, though. Now, of course, I can't really say much about Screwfang, of course, but technically, Wild Spin can lift up enemies. I have done that on a giant enemy before, so this is actually optional. But technically, Beast Attack does have some pretty good damage earlier on. It's probably one of her best attacks she gets around that period. Not to mention Green Whip. Not to mention those are very good skills she gets for default. So that's my recommendation for Verkota's skills for mastery. For Donna, when she joins up in the present day, the skills I would recommend having her master are Dragon Spirit, Elemental Shot, Mistral Edge, Boomerang Edge, Twin Moon Blade, Earth Dragon, Dragon Wave, Spiral Round Dance, Ice Age, and that's pretty much it. Water Burst is optional. It does move at a very small distance and only hits enemies at a proximity range near Donna. For optional skills, Sonic Rise is actually pretty deceiving because it has a very long projectile range. Elemental Shot is kind of weak, but when you combine that with Dragon Spirit and leveling up, this should give her pretty good options for freeze. I think that might apply only when you use Dragon Spirit with it. Of course, one thing you do need to keep in mind with Dragon Spirit is that it does deplete your SP consistently, but it does make some of her skills from the ones she has in the past, like Elemental Shot, Twin Edge, and Spiral Round Dance, to be gain some additional effects. But anyway, like I said before, Boomerang Edge is pretty awesome by the time you get this late game. Not to mention it adds up status elements like freeze. A large amount of her techniques do add freeze to them, like Ice Age and Water Burst. So if you have any freeze equipment, give that to her. She'll be able to do quite nicely with that. Earth Dragon is pretty nice. Not to mention you'll move along with this when you perform this attack, but it does have very good stun range for a B rank, B plus move. Of course, Dragon Wave is also very good too. This is actually one of Master Kong's moves you get, and that's actually very decent. Stays that way pretty much throughout the rest of the game afterwards. Ice Age is actually very good in terms of power, not much else, but does allow Donna to hit pretty much every enemy near her, and that's actually pretty darn good. So that pretty much concludes my recommended skills for each of the party members. I'm going to move our characters to another location for the fish guide. And once we get back, we'll go over the fishing guide. It's going to probably be a little bit more bare bones, but for the most part, we're going to try to get that done and get a little bit more content for to help players out trying to find fishing. It won't cover everything, but I am going to do the best I can to explain how fishing works in this game and what to expect. Anyway, I'll be right back. I'm going to Storm 331 temporarily signing off to take a break. But once we return, we're going to be going through the fishing guide. So hang tight. I'll be right back.